Welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Today we're going to be taking a look at the winter at Valley Forge. All right, the winter at Valley Forge, considered by a lot of historians to be kind of the darkest moment of the Revolution for the Continental Army, but also basically the moment that the Continental Army really transforms itself and everything begins to turn around at the same time. So let's take a look at how George Washington and the Continental Army end up at Valley Forge. All right, so 1777 had been a bad year for the Continental Army. They've been basically trying to keep William Howe and the British Army out of Philadelphia. Remember, William Howe had won that victory at Long Island back in 1776 and had taken New York City. Well, remember, he was supposed to go along with that plan with John Burgoyne to take Albany, but instead he heads towards Philadelphia, all right, again, which was where the seat of the government was. That's where the Continental Congress was located. All right, and so during 1777, the Continental Army is just simply trying to keep the British out of Philadelphia. All right, and there's a couple pretty major battles that take place. One being the Battle of Brandywine in September of 1777, and then in October the Battle of Germantown, which are both losses for the Continental Army and for George Washington. All right, and basically after losing those battles, the British are able to march into Philadelphia. The Continental Army, or I'm sorry, the Continental Congress has to flee, as well as the Continental Army has to flee. All right, and so as we go into the winter camp of 1777, George Washington wants to stay relatively close to Philadelphia. So if we look here at a map, we'll see where Valley Forge is located. All right, so if we look at the map here, you can see here's Philadelphia, and if we zoom in about 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia is where this winter camp at Valley Forge was located. All right, so the Continental Army moves in. They try to build log cabins and everything for the winter, but conditions are just really bad there at Valley Forge. So there's shortages of food, there's shortages of just about everything, blankets, horses. I mean, it gets to the point that men are actually, pulling wagons themselves. They're actually tying themselves to the wagons to pull them around. Like I said, they have no shoes. There's accounts of men, eating leather, eating the bark off of trees, just simply trying to survive. And this is just a terrible time. George Washington is begging Continental Congress for more money to try to, supply the army. But again, Continental Congress is having a tough time trying to get, the colonies or the new states at this time, I guess you could argue, to give money to help out the war effort. All right. One interesting thing that happens during this time is George Washington really solidifies himself as the leader of the Continental Army. I mean, there were doubts in his leadership, throughout 1777 because of all these losses. But Washington is the only officer that stays at Valley Forge the entire time with the Continental Army. All right. The men see him there day after day after day, trying to help them. He's setting up hospitals. He's actually doing early versions of inoculations, trying to keep the men alive and everything. And so Washington does everything he can to try to keep the army alive. At the same time, though, he also has a new military officer that shows up, a guy named Frederick von Steuben, who was a Prussian military officer who shows up and starts to train the army. And it's kind of interesting because this transformation begins to take place of the Continental Army. They begin to, really trust George Washington a whole lot more, but also they become far better trained. They begin to, understand how to fight, primarily because of von Steuben and his discipline and training of the Continental Army. So as the spring of 1778 begins to approach, things begin to turn around for the Continental Army. It's kind of interesting how, it's darkest just before the dawn. So as the Continental Army comes out of this winter camp at Valley Forge, they come out much better trained. They come out much more solidified as an army and ready to fight. But also, as they come out of the spring or of this winter camp, they get word that the French are on their way. Remember, we had that victory at Saratoga that convinced the French that they should come in and help the American side. So some important things happen here at Valley Forge, and we're going to see kind of a shift in what happens in the Revolution after this winter at Valley Forge. All right, so hopefully you found something interesting there. Hopefully you learned something, and so I will talk to you later. All right, thanks.